Ja, tusind tak, Lene. Tak for at invitere mig her. We said we would go in Danish, selvom jeg kunne på norsk også. I don't need this. Okay, so this time I have not prepared a speech as such, but I will tell you a kind of story or storyline out from my experiences and looking out from these experiences with Danish editors at a bigger picture of censorship and what does it mean beyond not being able to say certain words or being limited in saying them. So my theme is when you cannot say apartheid and genocide. So what does it mean? Let's start, if Søren, you can start the screen. Okay. Danish, I assume you will read quite easily as Norwegians. And this is actually a leaked communication. Well, it says a message directly to me in the email, because I have been writing more in the Danish press in the recent couple of years than I had before. I had hardly done it before, and I write normally in English and regularly for Mondowise for the past decade on Israel-Palestine. But I found it somehow intuitively necessary to get into the debate in Denmark. And this was an article in a progressive media. I will not name names, but the words apartheid and genocide went into the text, which was actually about, not directly about that, but as in by the way. And in the pages of this draft, I already got a comment. Apartheid was simply stroken out. This is a progressive media, by the way, printed media in Denmark. So the word apartheid was struck out, and instead occupation. So I already discussed it in the draft comments, and I already got a comment that we don't want to use that word. And then I complained to the chief editor, because I was working with an under-editor. I complained to the chief editor with a CC to this editor, and I said, "Kom ind i kampen, altså, get into this. You are way behind. Apartheid does not even need a qualification at this point in time." And then I had this mail exchange with the editor, who said nothing. The chief editor never said a word. She let this under-editor do the work. Clearly a Zionist person. We have many of them in the editing positions in Denmark. And he wrote to me an explanation, once again, why they don't want to use apartheid. And he says, so I'm basically translating, I just want to make it clear that our line is solely about linguistic precision and being sober in the debate. As I wrote to you earlier, apartheid is a word that is often used in the debate, but where the definition is often unclear. There are strong split opinions about the usage of the words, and as we cannot expect that the readers are in all of these nuances, we do not want to use it, simply. When you write, I also wrote genocide, reelt Folkedrab. When you write an actual genocide, it is it's like constituting a fact, and we cannot do that. I actually did get genocide in with a qualification that that many experts opine at the time. So I got it in, actually, and never mind with the apartheid right now. But as he continues, as I wrote to you earlier, we also don't want to use contributions where any critique of Israel is considered anti-Semitism, just as we don't want, just as the word Islamofascism doesn't belong in a sober debate. So in a way, when you put this all together, it's like this editor is somehow seeing a connection between a kind of swear word like Islamofascism, and apartheid. And he says that the definition is often unclear. And this is very striking because apartheid is a term that is one of the most precisely defined crimes in our times. It is a crime against humanity. It is defined in the 1998 Rome Statute of the ICC as a very specific crime. And although many people associated with South Africa because of where the name comes from, the apartheid regime of South Africa from 1948 to 1994, it has become a crime in its own right and cemented in international law. So why does this editor tell us that it is unclear? Obviously, because he doesn't want it to be clear. Because as an editor, you could think, oh, maybe it's your responsibility to make it clear. So you want me to clarify this better? Let me clarify. No, he just does not want to use it. And we have seen similar things. Like here's an example from 2021. Here, look, this is an editor. He is in Tel Aviv. He's used as a foreign correspondent, Hans-Henrik Fafner. And he's used by DR, Danish radio, regularly as a correspondent. He's an editor also in POV International. And he wrote this article, "It is absurd to call Israel an apartheid state. It is the Middle East's only democracy." And he wrote this, as you can see, it was published in Politiken, the biggest paper in Denmark, on the 22nd of March, 2021. This was already nearly 2 months after the Israeli B'Tselem human rights organization had come out with its report on Israeli apartheid, which had the title, "A Regime of Jewish Supremacy from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. This is apartheid." Not a particularly long document, and they themselves say that they more viewed it as a position paper, but it is considered like a report. After them, about a year later, Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch also came with similar conclusions, very long reports, hundreds of pages. And this is basically already there when in 21, when B'Tselem came with that report. They were not the first to mention this. Palestinian organizations like Al-Haq and Al-Mizan were already there. And notably, in 2017, a UN commissioned report, excellent report by Richard Falk and Virginia Tilley, went through this logic and definitely saw that apartheid was a definition fit for the Israeli regime. They had not reached the genocide conclusion, but of course now it's something else. So this muddling of the waters in terms of terminology has existed about apartheid. But now genocide. So what I'm going into here, well, you know what, before I go into this, I will go a little bit back on genocide, okay? Because I'm going to speak about a petition that is current, initiated by Magda Gad, a Swedish journalist, and it's a petition I'll go into that, to protect Gazan journalists and for freedom of press in general, and it criticizes the media in the West. I will speak about that. it's connected to genocide. So let me go a little bit back with genocide, because I was one of the initiators of a citizen bill. Do you call it borgerforslag? Yeah. Citizen bill in Denmark, which was called Danmark har pligt til at forhindre folkedrab. Denmark has the obligation to prevent genocide. I think it's carefully worded, and kind of, you cannot argue that title. You can argue its application in certain cases, but you cannot argue that title. That is absolutely rooted in the Genocide Convention. So we started working on it. We had the idea at the very end of December. I think it was 27 December 2023. And then lo and behold, South Africa was out a few days later with the genocide case against Israel, which the International Court of Justice took up officially on January 26th last year, and took it up recognizing risk of genocide and issuing orders, 6 points, which relate to unhindered aid, which was seen as causing a serious humanitarian catastrophe, including starvation, and other things like refraining from acts of genocide, acts that could fall under the Genocide Convention by the military, punishing incitement to genocide, and so on. Israel, besides issuing a report that it supposedly did not abide with these orders, which is why they had to be repeated in March and again in May. It made some symbolic moves at the end of April. You could see the aid was going a little bit up, but it never got nearly to the level of necessity. If you look before October 2023, we're talking about maybe 550 trucks a day. I looked at the data of the trucks in the last 2 years almost. Now it's becoming 2 years. We are talking about maybe something like 20% in the overall has come in. So it's been an accumulation of starvation and other accumulation of other crimes against humanity, basically. So when we were there, when we reached the signatures of the minimum of 50,000, which forces the parliament to consider, to actually do a law process on this question, on the obligation to prevent genocide. I think we reached it in around March last year. Yes, last year. And then they considered it, they brought it into process in May. And then there is a committee dealing with it, and then final vote in June. It was basically voted down in May. You could say it's not a final vote, but it was clear that there was a government consensus on voting against this, and only 3 parties, that is from the left, Innledning, Alternativet, and let's see, Innledning, Alternativet, and Radikale Venstre, a kind of left-center party, they voted for, and SF, which is historically known for being a left party, but on this has gone extremely rightwards, has simply voted not for or against. So abstention, if you will, or agnostic on this issue. Now, the discussion is really the interesting part here, and I also wrote an article analyzing this, because the main discussion against was brought forth by a man called Mikael Ostrup Jensen. He was at the time, he's from Venstre, which is a kind of right centrist party, the Denmark Liberal Party, as it's called in English. And he was actually the head of the Foreign Policy Committee at the time. And his argument was that, of course, Denmark generally has an obligation to prevent genocide. But he disagreed that the issue applied to Palestine, Israel in Palestine, and Gaza specifically. Now, the way he did this was, I learned later that this was an actual Israel lobby trick that is used by also by Israeli lobbyists like lawyers for UK lawyers for Israel. I witnessed Natasha Hausdorff live come with this argument in May. There was a debate at Copenhagen University. He came with this argument saying, look, there was this interview I think it was in April last year, in BBC Hard Talk with Joan Donoghue, who was the presiding president of the ICJ when the court issued the preliminary ruling in January last year. And she said in this interview, he says, you can find it in BBC Hard Talk. Just search that and Joan Donoghue. And she's saying there that if people use the shorthand of plausible genocide, because if you look at the order in point 66, it's a paragraph, and I can read it for you, but I don't need. They were saying that there is recognized a danger to the rights of the Palestinians to be protected from acts of the falling under the Genocide Convention. You can hear how you had to extend this in legal talk, and that it is plausible that there is this danger for them, and they need to check the plausibility of the application of the convention. And it's also plausible that the rights of South Africa to seek protection under the convention are agreed to by the court. The case is of such a nature that the court will take this case. So Joan Donoghue was saying the shorthand that people say plausible genocide as if the court decided it is not right. So she had this thing about that shorthand. But if you hear this interview, if you hear the 1.5 minute segment where she says this, before and after, she's emphasizing that the court recognized a risk under the Genocide Convention. This is a risk of genocide. This is a serious risk. The court does not take cases which have no merit, which have no, they'll use 3 or 5 years to find out that it was useless. They see a real risk and they actually issue orders, which it's not a standard procedure, but they issue it because they can see it, the risk. So back to Mikael Ostrup Jensen, he's saying he put those two things out from the very same interview. He cherry-picked that one thing. She's saying plausible genocide is not that. She's saying we misunderstood it. He says we misunderstood the judgment, and if we don't listen to the president of the court, the highest court in the world, who will we listen to? Voila. No genocide, no risk of genocide. And then the right-wing politicians, they repeated his argument. They thought it was magnificent. We were on the line with the politician from Innledning and didn't manage to, SMS her, please challenge this right now. No, it was over. And after the second voting, it took a few seconds. They had like 93 laws or something like that day. And I thought I would get to the parliament in time at 1:00. No, he went like a race. There was no debate. This one politician said, I'm going to say something. No, there was no time. So that's how it was done. It has been done in Denmark. And this is still the position of the government. You can actually argue that, I'm just looking, yeah, good, at the time, so I have a sense I'm about halfway. So you could argue even that this is actually illegal. It's an illegal approach. It was in January. You had Francesca Albanese on tour here. I don't know how many were, and Greta Thunberg accompanied her. I was organizing the Danish tour, which was just before that. So I said to Francesca, this is what is going on. And her comment was, is this just a wrong reading of the Genocide Convention? Of course it is, because as Line just mentioned, the convention is titled as the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide. How on earth are you going to prevent it if the court, even the court, there could have not been a case, there would still be an expert consensus now on it. But if the court tells you there's a risk, then you do not wait for the judgment. You have to act to prevent it, like the court tried. But the court cannot command. It is not the court's place to tell countries what to do. This is a third state responsibility. Okay. And there's another case on third case responsibility from, is it Namibia against Germany? Yeah, on this issue, but that's another thing. Okay, but let's continue with genocide and see what it means now with the usage of it, because the Danish press has been very, very sensitive to every time the word genocide is mentioned. And I've been on the radio and television. On the radio, it's like, just for fun, you can say genocide. You activate them to say this kind of automatic sentence, which they all say. We just want to mention that genocide is a legal terminology that is taken up by the ICJ, which has not ruled yet. So they basically push it away. And if you start explaining, okay, and then they ask you another question. So I decided, no, wait, let's go back to what you just said there, right? There is now an overwhelming genocide expert opinion that what is going on is genocide. Well, Amnesty, we have Mariam from Amnesty, but Amnesty has been out, and I think it was 7th of December last year with the genocide report. You could say that was also very late, and they know it too. I mean, I talked also with Agnes Calamar. It's like, okay, it takes time to process these things and make the report like forensic, but it has been recognized that this has all the marks of a genocide. Raz Segal, a genocide expert from USA, Israeli American, already wrote in Jewish Currents on the 13th of October 2023 his article, A Textbook Case of Genocide. And you can say, was it early? Well, he saw the signs, and we saw the signs from Israel's declared intentions from its very high leaders, what it was going to do, and then it was very obvious that it is going for that, for destruction of Gaza. So then now we are already in another place, because now we have, this is reported about, even in the DR it's reported about, that there's this consensus. Now the International Association of Genocide Scholars, they've already, I think a month ago, made a resolution. This is genocide. That's representing over 500 global experts. So there is this consensus. But now I'm going to show you a case where there's this petition. So the GAD petition, you can see it, and I recommend, if you're a journalist particularly, I'm also written on it, to sign that. I think it's a very important thing. So it started out in Sweden with Magda Gad, and I think that in Sweden they had about 500 signatures there last month already, and then some people took it up, some journalists took it up in other countries. particularly in the north or Scandinavia. And in Denmark, we got over 300 signatures. Two journalists, Sarah Bovin and Oliver Stilling, took it up, and they made a Danish version. And this is now the English version. So let's just look at that. Demanding safety for Palestinian colleagues and access to Gaza. And okay, we'll read a little bit there. For nearly 2 years, our Palestinian colleagues have been reporting from Gaza, risking their lives on a daily basis. 2024 was the deadliest year for journalists since the Committee to Protect Journalists began recording, and 70% of them globally, of those killed, were killed by Israel. AFP recently warned that their reporters in Gaza could die of starvation. Despite this grave danger, Palestinian journalists have made it possible for us to bear witness to the egregious war crimes Israel has committed against the civilian population, as well as the consequences of said war crimes. They have stood alone. And I won't go through the whole, it's not very long, but it's this part in particular, which we will look at. In addition, coverage of the war on Gaza has been insufficient, and through its failures contributed to legitimizing what most genocide and even Holocaust scholars are now calling an ongoing genocide. Now should not be a problem here, but if this is, now we're going to split hairs, because in the Swedish version they use the word, you can get Swedish, right? So some even how do you say Holocaust? Forintelse experter nu kalde det just et folkedrab. So that word just, it was taken even by machine translation. If you do it now, it was translated to DDR, that it is, like, or just. And then that version got sent to Magda Gad, and I think she put it up on the website some weeks later. But meanwhile, they were issuing it to Denmark, and they looked at the translation again, and they adjusted this because DDR, it can be understood in Danish as what it is, like that it was saying this is a genocide. So although you are citing the experts, you are saying it yourself actively that this is a genocide, right? Not supposed to be a big deal, but they sent it out to journalists, and about 30 in DR also signed it, as mentioned, over 300. And no one thought more about it, but it turned out that this earlier version, there was a mix-up, and that formulation was there on the website DDR. Anyway, they only began really looking at it when that petition came out. It was noticed, and the editors, my assumption is they got very upset about being told that they have been incompetent in covering this, what most experts now say is a genocide. So they started threatening. The chief editor of Berlingske, Tom Jensen, said, if you are signing this, then you cannot cover Israel-Palestine. You're biased. DR joined in. We're going to take talks with our workers. If they sign this, it's going to be a problem. I know already from the inside that they tell them, you're not going to cover Israel-Palestine. You might not be fired. You're not going to cover if you're still on there. Ritzau, the Danish Reuters, if you like, they also did that. And they all went for this, and those journalists, they started they wanted to pull their signatures out. And they found that there was this DDR, those 3 words were on the website. That became a pretext to pull out, and the pretext for saying that you're biased because you've just said it. Do you understand what I'm saying? That you said it in definite form. When the Danish people realized that there was there was a wrong version with that they already fixed. They immediately fixed it, and they said, "Oh, it's a mistake. Magda got it." Obviously, okay, they took the words out, and it's written like, some de fleste in Danish, som de fleste folkedrabs- og holocaust, og endda holocaust forskere nu kalder et folkedrab, okay? But then the journalist said, "We signed something else. We didn't sign that." They pulled out. And this is the state we are in. They do not want to show us that there is a consensus about this being the case, and it's much safer for them to say, "We don't know." And the way it's all, if you just consider what I told you about the parliament before, when you put those two things together, it says, we are not going to do anything. And that was my presentation. Thank you.